Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mind Split Cafe. Matt, I'm gonna let you introduce this one.
Well, Miss Lauren Fields is by far one of the most positive and genuine people that I've met in San Diego. I've had the pleasure of knowing her for 3, maybe 4 years, right, Lauren? And so I'm so thankful that you have the time in your schedule to join Mind Split and talk about all the positive things. I know we said positive, but that's why we're here today. Talk about all the positive things that you have going on in your life and why that is, right? So
Mm,
kind of go into detail why exactly you're here and let the
sure.
positivity just rain down.
Well, Matt and Chris, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here, and I'm so grateful. I'm sure when Matt and I met a few years ago, we never would have imagined it leading us to recording a podcast episode on mindfulness and positivity. But I
Exactly.
couldn't be happier to be here. So I believe the reason I'm sitting in this chair, I link it back to when I was younger. I grew up in San Diego, as Matt said, and I was an equestrian and I competed all over the world in hunter jumpers, and I had a freak horse accident. And I woke up from a coma from this accident, and the doctors, coma and traumatic brain injury.
Oh
The
my
doctors
gosh.
claimed, may have to relearn how to speak, may have trouble with memory retention, may have difficulty walking. And they painted a very dim picture of what my future was going to look like. And since then, I was just telling Matt and Chris, I graduate today or finished today with a master's in psychology. I have
Awesome.
developed and I have my Fields Well podcast where we talk all things mindfulness, psychology, wellness. I have a personal coaching business. And so my why is I go back to that younger girl who was given this, diagnosis of what her future
Mm-hmm.
could be like, and instead decided to go out and turn my adversity into empowerment. And anyone listening who's in a dark moment or having really negative thoughts, you are just a mindset shift away from a completely different reality and life. And we're going to get into that.
Oh,
I love it.
you
That was
got
a
me
powerful
excited.
statement right there. Yeah, that was a
You
very powerful statement.
yeah, this is why you are who you are, right? And so let me, I guess, my role with the podcast or with Mind Split is I kind of ask the everyday question that the fly on the wall would want to know, right? And then Chris is kind of the clinician. Everybody that listens to the show has got a concept of it. But the question that I have, and I've never asked you this before, we've known each other for years. What age were you when that accident happened? And
Mhm.
and then I'll let you answer, and then I'll ask the follow-up question after.
Sure. I was 14 years old when that happened.
So 14 years old, and it's kind of, as a teenager, that's kind of the formidable years of just, activity, right? Whether you're into sports or boys or, you know, whatever it is, right?
Right.
That's kind of like the main years where everything is sort of kind of, you know,
Formating.
formulating, right?
Right.
You had to have some sort of, I mean, looking back 20 some 30 years later, looking back, it's easy to say, yeah, it's great to have a positive outlook. But being a 14-year-old kid just waking up out of that coma, you had to have some sort of like, oh my gosh, my life is over, 14 years old. What, like, take us back to that moment so then we can really, really understand how you've transformed yourself into the entrepreneur, successful, positive person you are today.
Sure. So it's easy to learn how to tell the story, right? And condense the gap between, like, okay, here's the event and here's what I've
Of
learned.
course.
That was 16 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so much has happened since then. And I've realized how much our events from our childhood, traumatic events that maybe we didn't process correctly at the time, can show up in our lives today. And we
Wow.
might not realize how those are coming up. So I think for a while, I carried the trauma of that accident and tried to gloss over it, tried to move on with my
Okay.
life, tried to say that never happened. Let's sweep it under the rug. Raise your hand if you're listening and you're guilty of doing that, right? Something happened. We didn't want it to happen. And so we're pretending like it didn't happen. We're going on with our
Yeah.
lives without acknowledging the elephant in the room. And I believe that's because we're not taught proper coping skills in the education system. And so it's why I'm grateful to have studied psychology now and understand this is what happens to so many people is they don't know how to cope. They don't know how to handle stressful situations. And so then they turn to other coping mechanisms, whether it be drugs, alcohol, what have you, temporary band-aids, because they aren't taught when they're younger how to cope with life's difficulties, life's challenges that will inevitably present themselves. And so for me, growing up, I was a total athlete. I loved this sport more than anything. So I went from the hospital to the stable. My mind,
Wow.
I was 14 and I think I had that to my benefit. I didn't realize the severity of this incident. I just said,
Yeah.
I want to get back on the horse. Let me get back on the horse. I want to
No
compete
pun
again.
intended, right? You wanted to get back on
Right.
the horse,
Get back
literally. Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening is I had neurological symptoms following. And so then that's when the real reality hit is having to be in hospital waiting rooms, having some different surgeries to correct nerve damage from this accident due to a blood spot on my brain. So it kept coming up. And that's
Yeah.
when I said, you know what? I really need to stabilize myself to make it through this. Let me acknowledge what happened to me. And I actually was, telling Chris earlier, I did give a TEDx talk titled The Space Between Falling and Getting Back on the Horse. And the steps between falling and getting back up, we reflect, rebuild, and recover. And so I talk about that space between that we all ignore and how important that is for transformation.
Now, did you have one particular, I mean, obviously the event happened when you were 14, but to be 16 years later and to be so well versed in knowledge, and I know you're going to school, you went to SMU, shout out if you want to give them, I know they're coming up in the football, if you want to give them a
Yes,
shout out.
SMU.
Out of that
Pony
death
up.
penalty.
But over that 16 years and you you're graduating with your master's, has it been little by little chips that have gotten you to this point of like, okay, I'm okay with this, I acknowledge it, and now I am in a better space? Or was it one particular aha moment, fairly recently or whenever it was, if it was there a particular moment where you just said, hey, I just need to get help and I just need to figure the rest of this out because I need to be better? I'm just
Sure.
curious if how it happened.
So I think for a while I tried to be or do what I thought like society wanted of me. Like graduated SMU, was living in New York City, was working in hospitality as a lifestyle manager. So I was planning like extraordinary trips and itineraries for my private clients. And I just felt like the desire to do and be more and serve more. And so I started doing like yoga teacher training, Pilates teacher training, a health and wellness coaching certification, life coaching certification. However, I wasn't doing in my heart. I knew I always wanted to have a podcast, do public speaking, be a coach. But I was like, who's going to listen to me? Like, why me? Imposter syndrome sort of
Just
thing.
the
Yeah,
imposter
of course.
syndrome.
I suffer from it. Yeah, we've talked about imposter syndrome
Yes.
plenty of times on this show, but continue.
And I'll be so real with you and with our audience. I then started studying for my master's in psychology, was perhaps calling myself a life coach, but wasn't really working with private clients.
Yeah.
And I had a romantic relationship unexpectedly end right before I turned 30.
Okay.
And this perhaps would have been the person I thought I was going to marry, start a family with. When that ended so abruptly, and I realized, what am I waiting for? What am I doing? I have all these credentials. I'm like stacking up the credentials, but I'm not serving the world. I'm not sharing what I'm learning. I'm not helping others. And so I said, that's it. I'm going to start going for and applying for all the things that I've always wanted to do. I applied for TEDx. I met someone there that had stages I could speak on beyond that and had a podcast network I've joined. And it's just like been kind of a cascade effect since then. And so it almost is like these moments that bring us to our knees have the potential to be some of the most powerful moments and beautiful stepping stones in our life to our next opportunity.
Absolutely have
Yeah, that's
fallen in
phenomenal.
love with that. Like you, because I've known you pre life coach. Like we've known each other for a couple of years now. So I've known Lauren prior, and then we're friends on social media. So I see you now, right? So I've seen the kind of the growth that you've had. And I'm just so just encouraged and just inspired by what you have done and how you have transformed. You've always been positive, you've always been kind, you've always been nice, but the way that you're just projecting yourself now and the aura, it's hard to fathom that you were that 14-year-old girl that fell off a horse, literally, and got back on to realize that there's much more to be accomplished, and you're going to go for that event rather than pursuing your dream of equestrian, right? And so
Right.
it's inspiring to see and to hear, to know that you've accomplished so much in so very little time, because you've only been doing this for, like I said, 3 or 4 years maybe, and so it's been awesome to see.
Thank you, Matt. It feels really good to go all in on what you believe and give yourself permission to go after your dream. I believe that's why we're here as humans. And I think so many of us have that in our hearts. Like no one knows better than us what it is we want to do. And so often we want someone else to tell us, oh, go do this job, or have you looked into this? But it's like, you're the expert on your life. So give yourself credit for that.
Yeah, you're the driver, you're the navigator, the driver. You tell yourself where you want to go, right? And
Yes.
so something that you said a couple of weeks ago when we reconnected, when I called you to be on the show, and I don't know if you recall this, and I'm not going to get the quote perfect, but you'll know what I say. You'll know what I mean when I say it. Is I asked you how you've been, and you were like, I'm focused on saying yes to like life. Kind of talk about that and what you meant. And I know I butchered the quote, but talk about what you meant when you told me that you're just saying yes to life or experiences.
Sure. So I feel like the more that I say yes to life, the more I'm given, the more opportunities and more options and more events I'm given to say yes to. So when you start saying yes, I wholeheartedly believe I'm putting that energy out. I'm a yes for life.
I love it.
Someone calls, can you come here? Yes. I'm in this phase right now where I'm a yes person, and I'm given more to say yes to because of that. However, I do believe it's important to have boundaries.
I was going to ask, how do you find that balance?
Look at
Because
those boundaries.
I mean, if I called you right now, Lauren, and said,
Right.
hey, let's go rob a store, are you down? Obviously, you're not going to be yes,
But
I would
it's
hope
yes
there's a
to
boundary.
things that are in alignment with your values and your vision for yourself. So I talk a lot about life design and being really clear on what you want for your life and for yourself. And so long as it's in line with that, it's a yes, because you wouldn't imagine like the people you're able to meet by just showing up, by saying yes. Each yes is going to lead to something else. And I'd say action was my word for 2024. So I'm big on just taking action, saying yes. And I said the greatest way to stay stuck is by not taking action.
Oh,
Say yes, take action. I keep saying, if you're feeling like you're procrastinating, start talking to yourself. Do it now, do it now, do it now. Anything. You want to put a dish in the sink? Do it now. Do it now. And I keep saying that to myself, and it's so powerful.
I can't imagine you putting a dish in the sink, but but a little story, and I think we've shared it before on previous episodes. This brainchild, or this podcast, Mind Split Cafe, is Chris's brainchild, right? And he came to me and was like, "Hey, I had this idea," and I'll let Chris kind of continue the story. But I really feel like Chris knows where he wants to be with this entity, because Mind Split is now a magazine, and it's a podcast, and it's a newsletter. But this whole entity is something that's transformed, and only Chris can see it, and we're just kind of playing along. But I think Chris just said, hey, I want to design my life, and this is where I'm going. And I'll let Chris take it from there, but I think he really kind of tapped into what you were saying there without even knowing that he knew what he was doing, because look at where we're at now. We've had a podcast and a magazine and a newsletter, and we're growing.
Yeah,
So
2 newsletters now.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely did not have a vision, but I think the one thing is resilience. No matter how many times that it didn't work out in our favor, but we continued on, I think that that has been our biggest factor, and that's something that I wanted to talk to you about actually is resilience, because
Mhm.
resilience had to be a huge factor in where you were and where you came from and where you're at now. How how did you build that? How did you build your
Mhm.
resilience from
Yeah.
where you were at to, because I mean, most people when they're in a situation like that, and I'll be frank that, you know, I've been knocked down before, and it's so much easier to stay on the floor
Mhm.
and stay knocked
Mhm.
down.
Mhm.
So how'd you build that up? How'd
At
you get
14 years
through?
old. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
So
especially at 14.
for our listeners, resilience, it's not something that's fixed. It's something that can be developed and strengthened. Just like a muscle that you work out at the gym, your resilience can be strengthened. The way that I believe resilience is strengthened is by keeping the promises you make to yourself. Resilience is the ability to get back up after you fall. And in my opinion, resilience is believing in a future that's greater than your past. And if you believe in that, you definitely want to see what happens in that future.
Mm.
And so
You know,
you need to get your eyes focused on what's ahead of you instead of looking in the rearview mirror.
it's funny that you said that, because I heard the story not too long ago. I heard it again, but Kobe Bryant, when he was, when he was playing every summer after the season and he started his workouts again, he would make a contract with himself for his summer workouts. And it's kind of like what you said, you have to hold yourself accountable, right?
Mhm.
That contract was his way of holding himself accountable for the 3 or 4 days, mornings at 4 a.m., that sort of thing. Like, he
Mhm.
had to hold himself accountable by signing this contract with himself,
Yeah.
and so I'm amazed that, you know, you're here now and we're talking about this very same thing, because I know some of the listeners might be struggling with
Mhm.
the dark cloud that's over them or what have
Right.
you. And you're here now giving words of affirmation and encouragement and kind of helping
Yeah.
maybe reset their path.
And
You
what
know,
happens when you break that contract with yourself, or that, you know, you're telling yourself you're going to do that, and in Kobe's instance, you know, he was doing 4 days and he broke that contract and only did 2 a days, and you know, you get stuck in that rut after that point. How
yeah.
do you overcome that?
So, I mean, each moment is a moment to begin again.
Oh,
And
Mm,
so
that's
you have
well worded.
that relationship with yourself and realize no one's coming to save you. You know, we're waiting for someone to move that cloud away. But I also like to think of negative thoughts are like clouds on a stormy day. They're going to pass by. So don't get too attached to the highs or the lows, because it's like a wave. It comes in, it comes out, and that's just life. I don't wish
mm-hmm.
an easy life for anyone, because I think the struggles, they build character and they show you what it really means to be human. We're almost like taught that like feeling hurt or like struggling is a bad thing, but think about how much greater the high is going to be if you make it through this low point.
Yeah.
And so start today, start
Ooh.
now, start building a relationship with yourself, start earning trust with yourself by doing just the little things, whether it's like tidying up your room or doing some self-care, looking yourself in the mirror and saying, if you can't say yet, look at yourself and say, I love you, whatever your name is, insert
Yeah.
name. That's
Yeah.
a good practice to have in the morning, but maybe you can look in yourself in the mirror and say, I'm doing the best I can today. And I'm showing up
Yeah.
today. Thank you for showing up.
Now, I'm sure some of the listeners are amazed by you, right? But the question that I have is, does Lauren ever have a bad day to where she doesn't want to get out of bed?
Good question.
Mm, you know, it's been a really long time since I have had a day like that, but
Mm-hmm.
I will say like of course there are moments where I
Of
get
course.
sad, but I'm like, I have so much, and I've realized this. I thought about it lately, is like there were times in my life where I definitely did think a lot about the past, and like where there were some things I wish I could redo. And the
Uh-huh.
biggest mindset shift I have now is I have such a vivid vision of what I want to create in the future that I'm so excited for, and I'm so like go 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 towards that I'm really forward facing, and that has definitely helped keep me up, keep me elevated, and has been a really big game changer. So I don't have time to like lay around and not want to get out of bed right now.
I
I
love it.
love that. That
I
is
love it.
awesome.
And you know what? I don't believe that a bad day would set you back, but I wanted to
Mhm.
ask that
Mhm.
question because I'm sure some of the listeners they don't know you like
Mhm.
I know you, right? And so
Mhm.
maybe it's kind of, I just wanted to ask on behalf
Yeah.
of them, you know.
Right, of course. So, I mean, the way you can look at it is like, sure, we could have a bad day happen, but then I think you can remind yourself, like, even in that bad day, I'm sure there are things that happened that weren't all bad. Like, perhaps the
Yeah, of
bad feels
course.
like the dominating force, but like, I would challenge you at the end of that day. I have a gratitude journal at the end of every day. I try and write down at least three things that happened that day that I'm grateful for.
So
So it
you
could even be
journal.
as small as
Yeah.
like the sun was shining, or like I saw a flower blooming, or my dog like gave me a
I
hug,
woke
or
up.
whatever it is. Even if there
Yeah.
aren't like major things that happened, try and focus on what you can be grateful for.
Now, do you ever go back in this journal and kind of like revisit some of these days from a couple of months ago or last week, or like how often do you kind of revisit the journaling? And you said you
And
do
what
it
do
every
you do
day,
with
but
it?
how often
Hmm.
do you go back and actually read
Hmm.
the affirmations and just kind of peek and see what you said, you know,
You
or
know,
remember what you said?
occasionally, but not consistently. I think I'm so
Okay.
focused on like just making sure I do the gratitude journal at the end of every day, because that's even somewhat
That's even hard.
difficult. It's a you know, it
Yeah.
takes time. But it has been a huge game changer, and just like a reminder, as we've discussed, like there are people, okay, in the US, most of us who are listening have running water or will have a meal tonight. Like there are people in the world who don't have that. And so
Yeah.
some of the things that we're upset about, just like in the whole scheme of things, if we can change our perspective and look at how much other people may be suffering, like we don't have it that bad.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah, I agree.
Agreed. Oh my
And
gosh.
I want to add something in here that it kind of plays into your last day of school. How does psychology play into all of this? How does psychology play into resilience, into mindset, into self
Mhm.
improvement?
Oh my gosh, how long you got?
Hey, we can do a part two, three, and four. Don't
We
worry.
can You can come back anytime you want, Lauren. I've
Thank
got
you.
positive vibes and yeah, you
I
can come
can't
back
Psychology
wait.
is
anytime
my
you want.
favorite like subject to think about and
Yeah.
learn. So by all means, just lay it all out.
So I like to earn the right to be able to like hold space with someone. And when I knew like deep down in my heart that I wanted to be a coach, that I wanted to help individuals elevate their experience of being alive, I had to understand the science behind human behavior. And so I've spent the past
Yeah,
2 years studying for a master's in psychology, and I've learned so much that's so hard to condense into like a
of
2 minute
course.
answer right now.
Yeah.
But just like how much of our identity is formed at a young age, and we base our understanding of the world off our primary caregivers, who are our parents, and we trust that they're experts on life. I
Yeah.
think we all know that,
They're not.
that they're
Yeah.
Very
not, and
human
they're all
Yeah.
being.
just doing the best they can. But our upbringing really shapes our attachment style and our sense
Agreed.
of security or feeling anxious out in the world. And then this becomes what we believe our identity to be, and how we think, fixed mindset, growth mindset, based on the beliefs that were instilled in us when we were younger. And then we go
Mm-hmm.
out in the world and we never think to check, why do I believe this? One of my favorite scientists, Dr. Joe Dispenza, says we have 60,000 thoughts a day. Up to 90% can be repetitive, and up to 80% can be negative. So, everyone listening, start to pay attention to your thinking, because your thinking patterns can be changed. They aren't fixed.
They
Okay. And I'm
aren't.
a big
Yeah.
believer on having a growth mindset. And so, this is all some of the psychology work that I've learned and studied, and that I'm just so passionate about.
I love it. I
Yeah,
love it.
that I love the way you condense that down very
Hmm.
well,
Thank
actually.
you.
So
You
you
know,
you
it's
said that a lot of what we know and what we believe comes from our childhood, and
Hmm.
typically it's social institutions that will instill this into us, whether it be our parents, school, church, whatever the case is. How do you break those that aren't what you truly believe, or how do you start thinking outside of that? Because I mean that it's kind of hard to when it's beaten into you at a young age that
yeah,
this
when
is how
Sure.
it
or
is.
even your environment, like your
Yeah,
maybe people around you, surrounding
Hmm.
you,
Hmm.
don't have that same belief system or
Right.
that same mentality as you, and you're trying to break that cycle. Like, how do
Yeah,
you
well, I
do
would say
that?
number one is my belief system serving me. Number two, are the belief systems of those I'm surrounding, of those who are surrounding me, lifting me up or pulling me down. And number
Mm,
three, like probably most importantly, I would say listen to podcasts such as Mind Split Cafe. Listen to podcasts such as the Fields Well podcast.
mm-hmm.
Read books. Watch documentary series on Gaia Network. Like get outside of your norm and challenge your own belief system.
Mm.
I love that.
I love it.
Challenge your
Thank
own
you for the
belief
shameless plug on the Mind Split Cafe podcast.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Now, I'm a big believer in manifestation, power manifestation. You put it out there, the universe. I read the book The Secret many years ago, and it kind of gave the analogy of like a restaurant. You know, when you go to a restaurant, you place an order,
Mm-hmm.
the server takes the order, takes it back in, 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is. Your order comes back just the way you ordered it, right? Um, Similar to the universe, you put it out there, positive things will, positivity, the universe will bring it to you. How how can you how do you shift that? You mentioned the 60,000 90,000 thoughts, and the math of it, but what do you tell yourself when Lauren has a negative thought? Is there like a little mantra, or is there
Mm-hmm.
something that you just say, I acknowledge this thought, it's negative, I'm changing it automatically to pot? Like, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
curious of what you do to kind
Sure.
of just flip that switch.
So I think Gabby Bernstein, one of my favorite spiritual teachers, she's written many books. One of my favorites is The Universe Has Your Back. She calls it the choose again method. So when you notice yourself having like a negative thought or a thought that's not serving you, choose again. And it doesn't have to be like an exact opposite thought. Like, for example, if you're like, I'm not going to try this because it will never work.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, it's for sure going to work, I'm going to ace it, or like, it's going to make me $10 million. Say, what if it does work?
Mm-hmm.
Plain and
Yeah.
simple.
You don't
And
have
so,
to go to the extremes of the total opposite. You just
right.
kind of tell yourself, don't put a ceiling on that
Hmm.
thought. Like, what if
Hmm.
it does work?
What if it
What
does?
if? Yeah.
And like something that feels true to you, because then your energy is in line with what you wish to attract. If it doesn't feel true to you, your energy is probably going to be off. And this is a big thing with The Secret. Um, I don't know if there was a proper like, okay, yes, put that order in for what you want, but
Yeah.
then you need to be taking action towards making it a reality.
Of
You can't just like
course.
sit
Yes.
around on your couch and wait for that
Yeah. Of course not.
manifestation
Yeah.
to arrive. You have to take bold action. You have to be resilient. You have to like literally go. You have your whole life to figure out how. Get going.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I
I
love
love
it.
how like straightforward she is with getting
Oh,
things done. That's
yep.
it's phenomenal, actually.
Yep. Yep. I know her aunt, and her aunt is the same way. And I shout out to Orva. She's one of my dearest, closest like people. I absolutely love her advice, and
Mhm.
that's who introduced us. So shout out to Orva.
Yeah. Orva's a go-getter. And Orva, my aunt was taking me to 5:30 a.m. boot camps and
Yep.
weight training numerous times a week.
Yep.
So thank
I
you,
was
Orva.
I
Yeah.
was she took me to those same boot camps right before I got married. So yeah, I know exactly. Shout out to Brian
Yeah.
also. So yeah, so the we're running short on time, and I just want to again thank you for putting this on your schedule and being so kind to join us. Um is there anything that you that we haven't covered that you kind of
Sure.
want to just spill over and just let us know before we ask you to come on another episode? But like,
So often our listeners, like, we feel the need, like, oh, it's a new year. Like,
yeah,
I have all these big dreams for a new year. Whenever you listen to this episode, the new year can start tonight. It can start tomorrow. So,
mm-hmm,
like, all of this is so applicable at any point in your life to really zone in and start designing the life you create for yourself. Because what I like to say is at the end of this long road, when you're sitting, on your last day and you're looking back at your life, you're going to wish you went after all the dreams that were burning inside of your heart instead of wishing that you had. And so
mm,
get your energy up so that it's in alignment with what you want to attract into your life and start to believe in yourself and build that confidence by keeping the small promises you make to yourself. Because we are here, I believe we're here to go after whatever it is that is burning inside of our hearts. And when we start to go after that, little people, places, and things will all start to appear to help it become a reality.
I love that. How do people
That's
find you
powerful.
before we leave? How
Sure.
And
can how can
plug
you
your
mentioned the
newsletter and all
podcast,
that.
but if they're interested in hiring you as a coach,
Mhm.
like how
Mhm.
can people find you and connect with you?
So I'm most active on Instagram. My Instagram is my name, Lauren Fields. You can listen to the Fields Well podcast. I have a newsletter that's linked on my Instagram or on my website, fieldswell.com.
Okay. Awesome.
Awesome.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, I'm so blessed to have you.
I'm
Uh,
about to say you changed my mindset completely. Like there's things that you said that I have been neglecting and not doing that I'm about to turn around and do things
mhm.
differently now.
Yeah.
That's like my therapy today for sure.
Yeah.
I'm so glad. Time to get back in the driver's seat of your story. Let's embody that main character energy.
I
I
love
love
it.
it.
I
That is
love
Yeah.
so
it.
awesome.
Lauren Fields, thank you so much for joining the show again. And you're welcome back anytime you want to come back and
Absolutely.
keep us updated. If you've got something, positive happening or you're about to do another TED Talk, what have you, or you
Mm.
just want to come hang out with me and Chris, you're always welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Yeah.
Travel
Thank you
safe,
very
my
much.
friend. We'll talk to you soon. Till
Mhm.
next week, guys.
See
Take
you next
care.
week.